Hey everyone, I'm Sharon Pearson. Welcome to Perspectives. I'm so thrilled to be introducing you today. Today's guest is Mr. John Assaraf, a very dear friend of mine. I think we met around 10 years ago, and since then we've stayed in touch, mentored each other, support each other, hang out. And he's just a phenomenal human being. You may have heard of him. I'm going to read a little bit about him because he's a phenomenal human being and thought leader. So John Assaraf has a classic rags to riches story that today sees him regarded as one of the world's leading behavioural and mindset experts. John has built 5 multi-million-dollar companies, written 2 New York Times bestsellers, sat next to Ellen DeGeneres on her talk show, and worked on 8 movies, including the 2006 hit movie, The Secret. He is the founder and CEO of Neurogym, a company dedicated to evidence-based training methods for the mind. He's phenomenal. His latest book, Inner Size, which I've got here if you've got me on video, promises to help people recognize and release emotional blocks. And he's also dedicating this year, 2020, to talking about overcoming financial adversity in tough times. We didn't get into the financial adversity conversation as much, but we talked about all things mindset. And we talked about fear and overcoming it, and procrastination and overcoming it, and self-sabotaging and overcoming it, and everything that he shared so generously in this conversation. I love that and admire that about him, about what he's learned and what's working and what the science is showing can work. It's a very inspirational conversation. It is dedicated to us being our absolute best selves that we can be and fulfilling our truest potential. One of the things I notice that I find really interesting, and I don't know if you've had this experience or you experience it differently, I'd love your insights, but a lot of people in the space, they gear up for short term. They don't seem to be gearing up to be in the game for 20 years or so. It's like they're very excited about volume, and they're very excited about big numbers on the front end, like huge webinars, but they're not talking so much about the stick rate. They're not talking so much about the longevity. And I find it really hard to mentor them, John. I find it hard to find a way into that conversation with them because I'm the reverse. And I know you're as well. I'm caring about how long people stay and play and want to get value from us. And so all of our attention's on the back end. It's making sure that experience is so good. They only want to stay and rave about us. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, think about, another frame to add to that. The average person who works, whether it's in Australia, Europe, United States, makes no difference, and they're making, 50,000, 100,000, if they're doing really well, 150,000, $200,000 in a year. And they're doing well. They're living in a nice home. They have a nice lifestyle. And then all of a sudden they get into, maybe this internet space where you can market to everybody in the world and you can say, I can make $200,000 in a weekend. And all of a sudden, the greed factor comes in and you're thinking about that new car that you can get. You're thinking about that second house or that amazing trip you're going to take. And so, you're making decisions based on, what your lifestyle may be like today. And it's really sexy to think of that versus think about how am I going to build a business that works for me, where the revenue is recurring and repeatable, the asset is growing, and I could really build a business long-term versus just short-term thinking. And it's alluring and it's sexy, and especially for anybody who really hasn't built a business, they don't know what they don't know. And it's one of the things I love in working with you and working, on projects together and supporting each other is I know your value that you bring to the table in the marketplace and to people's lives. And you're in it for the long term. Of course, you want to help people get results short term, but you're in for the long term to make sure that you're growing a business and you're there through the good times and challenging times.
Yeah, and I have been, and you've been there with me as well. Thank you. I really
too.
appreciate it. One of the things that we met, how long ago was it? I'm trying to remember. I was trying to remember this morning when we were chatting.
Probably 10 years ago or so on one of my tours in Australia.
Yes. Yeah. Was it Queensland or North New South Wales? I came along and I think I managed to corner you for lunch when you didn't know who I was.
We met for lunch after the event. I think it was in Melbourne.
Was it?
I think it was in Melbourne, but
okay.
many, many, many events and people ago. All I know is I loved you then and I love you now.
You're so sweet. What I loved was your enthusiasm for me. You didn't know me, and I was just so keen to hear how you were doing what you were doing, and because I'd read your books before I met you, John. I'd read The Answer when it first came out, I think, that's going back a few years now. Yep, I've got it on my bookshelf. And I actually brought in your latest book with me today.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And you were curious and open. How much this business, or whatever you want to call being in business, the number of people I see who do well because of openness, curiosity, and they're really into other people. It's not a money venture. It's not how do I make money from it. It's how can I bring value to it. And that's one of the things I fell in love with about you, John. There was immediately, we just clicked on that level of wanting to brainstorm. How do we bring value to it? How do we make it bigger and better? Can you talk to that a little bit about openness and curiosity and how it's playing out for you?
You know, a few years ago, I've been on Larry King, you know, and he's ancient now, but I was on a show 8 times. And a couple of years ago, I had him actually on my show. I interviewed him on one of my shows. And I asked him, I said, Larry, what makes you so good at what you do? And he said 2 things that were really, really interesting to me. He said, number one, I asked the questions that the audience wants me to ask if that's what they're thinking about of his guest. That was number one. He said, number 2, he said, John, I'm just insatiably curious. Yeah. He says, I just want to know stuff. I want to, you know, I want to have a full mind and a full heart of the things that are of interest to me. Mm. And so, you know, when you and I started to chat, you know, 10 years ago, you were curious. You were also highly intelligent and great at what you did. So as much as you were wanting to ask me questions, I wanted to ask you questions. I wanted to understand, how did you think? How did you become successful? You know, everybody's heard this, right? The saying, success leaves clues. Well, if you're successful, I want you to give me clues. And if I'm successful, you want me to give you clues. And so let's say 90% of what we know is the same and 10% is different. Well, that 10% is a big clue. And so I'm fascinated by finding, you know, little things and big things, different distinctions, different ways of explaining something, different ways of understanding something, different things that work for you that may not work for me. And that is coupled with many, many years ago, you know, I was reminded by my first mentor. He said, you know, once I teach you what I have learned so that you can be successful, always give away as much as you can to help other people become successful. And so I seek to be a go-getter, right? But also a go-giver. Yeah. And so I want to just keep it in flow. And I've discovered in my life is I can't outgive the universe.
Yes.
I just can't. It's like, and you being down under, you know, this will make more sense to you than probably us here in the United States, but you know, it's like a boomerang. You throw it out, the darn thing keeps coming back. Yeah.
So I agree with you. I remember the moment, it was 17 years ago. I started out as a coach, John. I don't know if I've told you this, and I got asked by a potential client, why would I work with you? And I thought, that's a really good question. If I don't have a good answer for that, because I want to make the sale, but I better have a good answer for that for myself, for my own sense of me and being my truest self. And I said, well, go and talk to everybody else who's thinking about hiring, then we'll chat. So he went and did that. I was the 6th interview of the day that he'd done. This is very early on. And I said, well, I don't know if I can give you what you want. Let's figure out what you value and what it is you want to achieve, and then see if we're a match. And I see a lot of times that maths gets reversed by people wanting to get. It's like, how do I make the sale? How do I get the business? How do I get? If we reverse it, it gets so much easier. What is it you're looking for? How can I serve you? How can I provide value to you? And if I can't do that, I'm going to refer you on, which we've done to you and to what you do, and you've done for us. But if I can serve you and I can add value, that we should be together. And to me, that value conversation's the only one that matters to do well for a long time in any business. It's how do you provide value and how are you showing up ready to give it. And the other thing I noticed was people were holding on, John, to what they had, and you had to spend money before you could get behind the locked door. Whereas I know your attitude and my attitude is have at it. It's have the knowledge. I'll give you what I can. Just have at it. And then it gets even better when you join. So can you speak to that a little bit, that this attitude of generosity and giving, and it's key to being in any business for a long time?
You sparked a couple of things in my brain. When I first got into selling, 40 years ago, I was 19, right? So that puts a little perspective. I remember my first mentor saying, now, if any day you come into the office, and I was doing a lot of telesales, like on the phones, calling people I didn't know, phone numbers, and with a script in front of me, says, "Hi, this is John Assaraf with Allen Brown Real Estate. I was a real estate agent." He said to me, if you ever come into the office and you're thinking about how much money you need to make today to pay for your car, or because you want to go out with a young lady on a date, you need money, or you need to pay for your rent, don't come to the office. He says, every day you walk into the office, I want you to walk into the office wondering, how can I serve somebody today on the other end of that line? He said, selling is doing something for somebody, not to somebody for your benefit. So that was my first frame that I learned about selling. Right? And I had, like many other people, probably the wrong idea of used car salespeople. And I had this idea and associations with, selling equals like screwing somebody, or selling equals doing something to somebody. And he set me straight right off the bat. So that's part one, of the trigger. So selling is to do something for somebody. And I lost my train of thought on where I was going with that, but I had two really good points, right? So
we'll have to come back for the second podcast if you want the second thought. I love it.
The second thought was when I wrote my book, The Answer, Grow Any Business, Achieve Financial Freedom, and Live an Extraordinary Life. It became a New York Times bestseller. And I remember Jay Abraham, the legendary Jay Abraham, who is one of the leading copywriters and strategists in the world. He read the book and he says, "Why are you giving away so much amazing content? You could be selling that." And I said, "Jay, I'm going to give people such an overdose of amazing content. They're going to have to understand what they could do to keep going to learn with me." And that book right there, forget about how many it sold, but the number of people, that ended up buying programs, coaching, consulting because of that book, and because there was so much into it, was millions of dollars. And so whenever you put that much value in the marketplace, people get a chance to see that, because so few people are prepared to give more than they expect. And people have this, a lot of people have this mindset of, well, let me hold back. And I'm like, why? Like, baseball players don't hold back. Soccer players don't hold back. Cricket players don't hold back. Football players don't hold back. Rugby players don't hold back. They play full out. They put it all on the field. Put it on the field and watch what happens. People, oh my God, look at all this stuff you have.
I love that. One of the ways I look at it, John, is if this is the line between us, people are trying to keep at what they have, and the other person's trying to keep what they have. And if you're on audio right now, I'm using my hands in a really cool way. But the goal, I believe, to have great relationships and to do really well, and I don't mean just financially, I just mean to have a great life, always try and go over that line. If that person tries to go over the line, it's like, you're going to have my back, I'll have your back, so we don't have to watch our own backs. We can let go of worrying about how I'm doing. You can let go of how you're doing, because you got me and I got you. And that perpetuates, that transparency and that trust perpetuates relationships, to me, that go long term, rather than that icky moment when you realize, oh, they were just taking care of themselves then. So right now I've got to pull back a little bit. And so the dance of withdrawal begins. And so I know in my business, the people I've done best with over the years, the longest relationships and the best, including you, have been, you've got my back and I've got your back. How can I serve?
Yeah, a lot of people, again, we've been taught to operate from a place of fear. Right? fear of what if I give you too much and you don't pay me for it? What if I show you my true self and then you embarrass me or judge me? What if, negative consequence? And what I think that, I know you've discovered and I've discovered, and many people are, start to discover as they get a little bit older and hopefully wiser, is, the more you show up with your authentic self to really help others, the more or the less fear they have
Yes.
about you, right?
Yeah.
Versus more fear.
The walls can come down.
Yeah, if you're dating, do you put your worst foot forward or your best foot forward when you start out? Everybody wants their best foot forward. Well, why not put your best foot forward with an open heart, a giving spirit, so that you can enhance somebody else's life somehow without trading, right?
Yeah.
So there's a big difference, not trading, right? I'm giving. Giving means that there isn't an expected return.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to give just because it's the right thing to do. It's the way to feel. And what happens when you do that, and we can get into some of the metaphysical sides of it, of what happens when you're giving your love, energy, tools, resources, ideas to people. There's just an abundance. It just keeps flowing your way. So operate from a place of abundance instead of scarcity.
For me, it creates a feeling of trust where I can relax and be more my authentic self. It becomes this loop of self-perpetual. The more I give, and that's received with love and respect, or what, there's space for me to turn up, the more I want to turn up, and the more I want to turn up. Versus someone who's very reserved with me or holding back or still waiting to suss me out. I'm like, man, this energy is taking a lot more to get through and for us to make something happen. And it slows down the process of creativity and innovation, or whatever it is you want to build together. The project slows down on the rocks of being reserved because I'm going to just hold back. And I see a lot of people doing that. And after so long, it's like, come on, we can do this. We know what we're doing. Let's just do it and get on with it and have some fun with it. I think there's a lot of childlikeness in you and in me, John, when we do this, because it's just fun. It's meant to just be fun.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that is, just because I give, let's say you or him or her, it doesn't mean that they are the ones that are going to give me back. It might just be me giving them or them giving me. But if I consistently am seeking out ways to give, there's other people that are giving me, and things have happened, I'm sure, in your life and in my life and Maria's life, where it's like, oh my God, like, can you believe that we just got invited to, a week-long trip to Sardinia on this 150-foot yacht of this person we just met? Like,
wow.
Isn't that like a giving that we didn't expect? Well, maybe it wasn't from the people or the person we gave a lot to, but all of a sudden this is somebody just giving us this incredible gift. I personally think that is, the universe at play.
Yeah, that's right? Fantastic. That's wonderful. Yeah. One of the things you're really big on this year, help me out here and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about procrastination and helping people overcome it. And I did used to be an expert on procrastination before I made a different decision. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Procrastination cost me years of my life. It cost me a feeling of joy about my life. It cost me a lot of my health because I kept procrastinating getting well and taking care of myself. Mm-hmm. It cost me just feeling like I could live a full life. And I know you're really great at speaking to this, John. I'd love you to share with our listeners and our viewers your thoughts on this, because I would have wasted 10 years in that procrastination land many years ago. It's 27 years ago.
As you know, my passion is, the neuroscience and neuropsychology of stuff. So when we think of the word or the behavior called procrastination, it's an effect. And very few people look at procrastination as an effect of something. And there's only 3 causes, according to neuroscience, for procrastination to exist. So in about 1% of the population, it's actually an arousal mechanism in their brain. So there's a very small percentage of people that when they procrastinate, the dopamine release is so high
Oh,
that
wow.
they actually get neurologically, biologically aroused, and then they release it, which causes another rush of dopamine because they actually do it. So that's very, very small. The second reason people procrastinate is due to self-image, self-worth, self-esteem. So if there's a project, a goal, a vision to become a coach, to write a book, to share our life with somebody, if we have a subconscious image of ourselves that doesn't match the goal that we want to achieve, then we'll procrastinate because there's almost one part of us that wants to put the foot on the gas, another one on the brake. And our hidden self-image will almost always win. Yeah. And then the third one, which is really tied to that number 2, the self-image, is fear. So let's say I go ahead and do this thing. Let's say I invest in this thing and I fail. Then what does that say about me? And how is that tied to my self-esteem? Or let's say, I do this project and I hand it into my boss or to my partner, and they don't like it and they embarrass me, or they judge me, or they shame me. So now we have all of these unconscious patterns that are activating the brakes of our life, and that's what causes procrastination. So in either one of those 3 arenas, if you work on understanding which 1 or 2 are you, or possibly 3, and then you focus on the cause that's triggering procrastination, and you eliminate the cause, procrastination goes away.
Okay, talk more about that. How so?
How does it go away, or how do you eliminate the cause?
Yeah, either. So I get what you're saying. So the procrastination is the outcome. It's right. Almost the symptom of.
It's a symptom of. It's
the internal neurology that's going on. It's the effect. The cause is, I think it's the cause, is the self-esteem issue, what we tell ourselves, what we imagine could go wrong, how we convince ourselves there's only downside. So correct. What seemed exciting suddenly starts becoming like a pinball machine of shall I, shan't I, shall I, shan't I? How do we come back to, how do we address this, that first bit, sure. So it doesn't get to that?
So, the self-image, let's talk about the self-image. And so who would you have to believe you are in order not to procrastinate? Right? So who would you have to believe you are right now? And what would you have to believe in the event that you failed that wouldn't affect your self-esteem? Right? So as soon as we start to shift the questions that we ask ourselves, which you're a master of, you're like a master of the masters, right? So as soon as we start to shift the perspective and we stop to minimize ourselves in who we are, and we create a healthy self-image and self-worth and self-esteem that matches the vision of the goal that we want, the resistance starts to go away. So can you use, affirmations or declarations? Of course you can. Can you use mental contrasting techniques to retrain your brain to say, okay, let me imagine myself with my current self-image or self-esteem, okay? How does that feel? It feels okay, but it doesn't feel great. Is it the self-image and self-worth and self-esteem that I need in order to achieve this vision goal for my life? And the answer is no. Well, can I imagine in my mind going from this self-image or self-esteem and using a mental contrasting technique saying, this is the old me, this is the new me. And is it possible that if I did that, let's say 100 times over the next 90 days, 3 times a day for 1 minute each, is it possible that the act of contrasting old me, new me, old me, new me, old me, new me 100 times, is it possible that I would activate certain neural networks and patterns in my brain, specifically, the nucleus accumbens and insula, which is going to release dopamine as soon as I do that. And then if I share that with somebody else, I'm going to actually activate my oxytocin hormones in my brain. That's going to make me feel really good. And is it possible that by doing that, I'm actually building a brand new neural network that overrides the old network? Possibly. That is actually how we do it. So no different than a Hollywood or a Bollywood or an Australian actress receives a new script and they say, hey, listen, learn this script. I'll pay $1 million to take this role. What would you do to learn that script and become the script. You'd practice it, right? You'd read it. You'd look in front of the mirror. You'd have the script. You'd put it down. You'd practice and practice and practice so that you and the script became one. Well, what are the tools, techniques, and processes that you're using right now, okay, to become the person that's capable of achieving her goals, his goals, etc.? And most people just have the goal, but they don't have the process by which they become that goal and create that unification between their head, their heart, and their gut and their behaviors.
How much do you think mental rehearsals played in what you've created?
Listen, I have my Exceptional Life Blueprint right here on my desk. There's 43 pages on here of pictures, of prayers, of goals, of visions. I have it on my cell phone recorded. I listen to it every single day. I mentally rehearse it every single day. And people ask me, like, why do you do it? You've already achieved so much success. Well, it's because I achieved so much success that I want to keep doing it to maintain. You know, it's like if you get into really great shape physically, like as soon as you stop, what happens? You get out of shape. Well, why would I want to take neuromuscles that are strong and weaken them? Why would I want to take processes that have helped me become the person that can achieve some goals? Why would I want to stop doing the things that work?
One of the ways I look at it, John, is I picture a country road that's all grown over with grass, and that's the analogy that really works for me. So what kind of mind do I want around whatever it is I'm looking to build a mental muscle around? Do I want the country road that's all weed covered and barely rutted, muddy track, or I want it to be a really smooth ride? And the only way I'm going to get a smooth ride is if I keep revisiting and revisiting. We keep driving there, Eventually, it's going to become better for us to drive through there. That's really worked for me for years now, for nearly 2 decades. Just this mental rehearsal idea that if sometimes the dreams are really big, I get that, and they seem like a real stretch to me, but I don't have to be all of that today. I just need to mentally rehearse heading in that direction. That's what because I don't have to be, I never would have dreamed 17 years ago this, but I could mental rehearse the next steps. And the more I rehearsed that, the more comfortable I got with it. And also the more real it became for me, the more possible it became for me, because by then, there's actually research for this. The basketballers visualizing, practicing shooting the three-pointer versus actually rehearsing the three-pointer, their results on the game actually were about equal. So the visualization to me is just, I've got to picture the road for me over and over again. And now it's so automatic. Any fear I have or thoughts of procrastination, as I say this, I'm reflecting on it, aren't needed. I don't need those crutches of putting it off or convincing myself I can do it later, or I'm too busy, I'll do it when I don't need those mental crutches anymore, because this landscape is rich enough to carry me forward.
Yeah, and the visual that you used is all based on the science of neuroplasticity, right? Our brain's ability to create new networks. And, everybody knows, what a new road is. If you live in a city or even the country and they build a new road, well, think of mental rehearsing as developing a new road.
Yeah, nice.
A new road path. And the more you create it, the more you can add more neurodes to it and reinforce them. And so that's what the science of neuroplasticity is, that we're making new connections every day. The connections that we reinforce become part of something known as a default mode network. It becomes the new way of being, the automatic self, right? So right now, every one of us has the automatic self that we are. And that's the easiest path for our brain to take because we've traveled down that road before, often. And so if we want to achieve a greater or a different level of success, we have to change with the patterns that are in our brain. And that's, you can ask questions to shift the perspective. You can behave differently. You can use mental contrasting, mindfulness, visualization, meditations, affirmations, declarations, cognitive behavior therapy. There's a variety of different methods in which to do it. The key to understand is we will never outperform our own hidden self-image, ever. And if we do, then the lottery effect comes in and we sabotage the success, right?
One of the ways I've done it is to ensure I always have people around me who I aspire to become like or am inspired by. So in the beginning, I didn't have it within me to mentally rehearse. That seemed like just a bridge too far, but I could see others had done it and created lives, just truly remarkable lives, and just admired them so much. I thought, well, if they can, how are they doing it? So my mental rehearsal was not how can I do it, it's how are they doing it? And that's why I became so curious in the beginning and made sure I got around people. That's why I traveled to the States so much, John, just being around the people who were having these conversations every single day. It was nothing to them to talk about doing well and succeeding. It was an expectation, not a hopeful wish. They weren't self-sabotaging. How are they doing it? Until it became normal for me to ask that question for myself. So I kind of took a two-step path to get there until it was okay for me to feel that way about me.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You said something that I remember having a dialogue with actually my second mentor, and it's around, you know, mental rehearsal. When you can't, like, you know, maybe close your eyes and mentally rehearse there, but every time you're in the environment, whether it's by, you know, a Zoom call, watching you and I, reading a book, seeing somebody's success, watching somebody else succeed, you're actually mentally rehearsing because the mirror neurons in your brain have actually activated. And so when your mirror neurons are activating, seeing somebody achieve those successes as you talk about and you're in the environment, it is an actual mental rehearsal doing that, because you are, whether it's you're aware of it or you're not, secretly thinking, I want that result. It would be so great to have that lifestyle. It would be so amazing to help that many people. And so whenever we are in that environment and we keep seeing it, it is a form of mental rehearsal via the activation of our motivational centers, the activation of our mirror neurons. And so anytime you can, you know, read, watch, listen, connect with, be in the environment of successful people that you aspire to have lives like, do it. I mean, that is one of the tickets to success. I eliminated all people in my life that are psychic and emotional or financial vampires. I just don't want them in my environment anymore because I know what it was doing to my own brain many years ago, including somebody I loved very deeply as a family member.
Mm. There's a level of moving out of automatic into conscious that I'm hearing about. And if there's anything that I put down my trajectory in my life to, it's trying to become self-aware. I was talking about this with JP this morning on our morning walk. The people I want to be around are striving for self-awareness. They're striving to know themselves, not to voice to themselves, make themselves look perfect, none of that, but just to be in touch with who they are and who they want to become. That to me is almost the most important conversation we can have as human beings. Are we in the environment, and are we nurturing an environment in here that is going to enable us to know ourselves and to know who we want to become, the best version of ourselves we can become?
Yeah, I wrote down DCE, something I've been giving a lot of thought to over the last number of years. So thought number one was awareness gives us choice. Choice is what gives us freedom. Yeah. So that's number one. And DCE is deliberate conscious evolution. Yeah. So we're in the place right now where, you know, we have learned more about the human brain in the last, you know, 10, 20 years than we've known in 5 million years of humans evolving on planet Earth. And, you know, 108 billion humans have walked on Earth since beginning of time. And we're finally at the point where we're getting enough information that, you know, we have this thing called the brain, and we can actually deliberately manipulate it to evolve faster than normal. And we're just entering that era right now. And as soon as we get into deeper levels of augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, hologram technology that's coming down the pike, we are going to experience a massive deliberate shift that we can direct and control better than ever before. And for the time being, there's still stuff that we can do to become more aware, to be mindful, to be at choice versus, being a victim of. And that's really what gives you the freedom, is to know that I can choose my thoughts. I can shift my emotions or feelings on demand if I learn to, and I can act or not act based on my deliberate choices, because that's what I want to do, versus being an automatic robot, behaving in ways today that I did yesterday or last week or the week before, being a victim of my patterns.
One of the things I notice a lot with people who join us, John, is how proud they feel. They didn't just break away from any negative thoughts they had, but a lot of them share how important it was to break away from the tribe around them, telling them they can't, they shouldn't, or it scares them. I don't know if the numbers have gone up. It feels like it has. People worrying about approval from others instead of seeking support from others.
Well, it comes from insecurity. It comes back to that self-image piece, right? If you think about from the time we are born, right, we have our parents, then we have our teachers, then we have boyfriends, girlfriends, then we may have a job and a boss, that we like. And then where are we getting that approval and that do this, don't do that? Most people, I'm gonna stretch here right now, and I'm gonna say most people, meaning the majority of people in the world, don't have a healthy environment to grow in. It's an environment of scarcity, of I can't, of fear-based decision making. And I can understand, parents of ours that, grew up in World War II, grandparents in World War I, scarcity, security, lack, not abundance. So if we think about, it's like one or two generations to all of a sudden go from scarcity and security is the important part to, but there's an abundance, but that's not the environment I grew up in. We know environment affects our conditioning, our perspective, our expectations, our behaviors. And even though we can logically, hear this and go, yeah, that's right. If we are wired, okay, at the unconscious or subconscious levels to have a scarcity mindset or a protective mindset or a fear-based mindset as the core of how we operate, then that's going to win out over logic and over information. Information doesn't make people change.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me because I love getting data. I love getting facts. I know you do as well. How do we help someone who's recognizing this pattern in themselves and recognizing, okay, so I actually do need to change something. I am too reliant on what other people think, or I am too reliant on old patterns that aren't helping. There has to be a mechanism where we can help someone jump into, it's possible for you, because there's no way anyone's the exception, John. And I hear this a lot. I think it's not going to work for me, and they're about to put in their excuses to why they're exception. No one is the exception. We can all have this working for us.
Now, the names and faces change, the story stays the same. One of the things that I always like to, there's two things that you just percolated from my mind. One is a story, and I'll start with that. And then the other is around, the time that we're living in, 2020, 2021 time frame. So the story. When I was 19 years old, I was getting into a lot of trouble with the law. I'd left high school at grade 11. I didn't think I was smart enough, didn't think I was good enough. My grades proved me to be right and the teachers to be right. And so I left, and I was actually in the top 99 or the top 1% of my class that actually made the other 99% possible. So I was, I was like a winner back then, right? There's a good reframe for you.
Yeah.
I didn't do well in school. And so my brother, because I was getting in trouble with the law, doing breaking and entries and selling drugs and doing drugs as a teen, my brother introduced me to this man by the name of Alan Brown, who's a very successful real estate developer, had real estate offices, happily married, children, just like it looked like just a perfect life. And he was kind and gentle and healthy, and it just looked really good. And the truth is, it was. And the first day that I met him, I took the train from Montreal, Canada to Toronto, Canada, 350 miles, 500 kilometers. And I took the train just to meet this man for lunch because my brother said, maybe he can help you, maybe he can shed some light on you. So I sat down at lunch with him, and he asked me about my vision and my goals for my life. And I was 19, okay, 19 years old. I said, my goals, I want to get a job. I want to get my own apartment, move out of my parents' house. I'd love to buy my own car. And he goes, yeah, oh, okay, basic, easy. What are your other goals? And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, what else do you want to achieve? And I don't know. I never thought about it. So he gave me this document, and it was probably about 8 pages. And just to put into perspective, right? I was 19. It was May of 1980. And on this document, the first question, Sharon, was, at what age do you want to retire?
Oh, wow. I love that question.
I'm 19, retired. I'd like to get a job. I'm going to retire. Next question, how much net worth do you want? I looked at him, I said, Mr. Brown, he's asking me what age I want to retire. I'm just want to get out of the gate and start the game. And he said, just write down something.
Oh, wow.
And I said, over here it says, how much net worth do you want to have? I asked him, what's net worth? What's net worth? And he chuckled too. And he says, well, he explained to me what net worth was. And I said, what kind of lifestyle do you have and what do you want to do? And so I wrote down, I want to retire at age 45. I want a net worth of $3 million. I might as well have written 3 billion, because 3 million, my father made $25,000 a year. We know nobody that we knew was a millionaire, let alone have $3 million in net worth. I want to travel the world. You know, I want a Mercedes Benz. I want a nice house. I want to retire my parents. I wrote down all this stuff. And he read it. And he said, this is actually a pretty good vision, some good goals. And he said, where'd you get that? I said, well, it's a TV show that I like called Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous. And they seem like they're rich and they have a lifestyle. I'd love to live that kind of a lifestyle. And he says to me, he said, John, he said, you seem like a nice enough young guy. And yeah, you're getting in trouble. And yeah, there's some language and self-image issues that I can pick up on quite fast. He said, but I'm going to ask you one question. And the answer to that question will determine whether you achieve every one of those things on this sheet of paper, on these sheets of paper. In the back of my mind, I'm going, one question? This guy's on drugs. Like, one question is going to determine whether I achieve these or not. So he says to me, he says, are you interested in achieving these goals? Or are you committed? I said, what? He says, are you interested or are you committed? And I said to him, I said, well, what's the difference? He says, listen, if you're interested, you're going to do what's easy and convenient. If you're interested, you're going to allow your old stories to control you. If you're interested, you're going to keep thinking you're not smart enough and not good enough and not worthy enough to achieve your goals. If you're interested, you're going to allow your limiting beliefs about what's possible to hold you back. If you're interested, you're going to do everything but what you need to do to be committed. And if you're going to be committed, you're going to have to upgrade your knowledge and your skills. You're going to have to create beliefs that match the vision and goals you want to have. You're going to have to create habits to achieve those goals. You're going to have to upgrade your knowledge and skills. And you're going to have an attitude, I'll do whatever it takes, that's honest and legal, instead of the attitude you have right now of dishonest and illegal. So, are you interested or are you committed? And I remember, Sharon, this was 40 years ago, literally 40 years ago. I remember, feeling this excitement and fear at the same time. And I just yelled, well, I'm committed. And he put his hand out. He says, in that case, I'll mentor you. And I said, great. What's a mentor? True story, true story. And he says, well, a mentor is when somebody knows what to do and how to do it and why to do it and when to do it. And they share that with the person wanting to do it and wanting to achieve the results. They shortcut their path. They save them a lot of time, money, heartache, and headache, and they give them a clearer path that's effortless, not effortless, but effortless and stress less than normal. So that's what a mentor is. And I shook his hand. And that was the beginning of my career as, number one, a real estate agent, then somebody who built, a 85 office, 1,200 person real estate company over the next 10 years, doing $4.5 billion a year in sales. One question, one answer, one lunch, one decision.
I love it. And I also believe what you did a little bit more than that. You took action in that moment. You said you were committed and then you did something about it. It's because words can be cheap, John. Yeah, I'm committed. What are you doing about it? That moment, you allowed it to infuse you and you made a new decision.
Yeah, the other part of that story is he said, great, well, the first thing I need you to do is move from Toronto to Montreal. And I said, what? How am I going to move from Montreal to Toronto? I don't have a car. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. He says, there you go. You're already giving me excuses. I said, I know, but these are real. This is true. And he says, I don't care if it's real or true. Are you interested or are you committed? I said, Mr. Brown, I said, I don't know anybody here other than you and my brother. I don't have a job. I have $40 in the bank. He says, I don't care. Make the decision first. Figure out the how next. He says, there's your first lesson. So I said, fine. I was actually a little angry. I said, fine, I'll move to Toronto. In the back of my mind, I'm going, my parents are going to think I'm nuts. They think I'm getting into trouble again and I'm just doing something illegal again. He says, the next thing I need you to do, and these are the exact dates. He says, on May the 5th, there's a real estate class that's starting. I want you in that class. You're going to go to school for 5 weeks, pass the test. You can come work for me at my real estate company. I said, you want me to come and go to real estate school? I fucking hate school, I told him. I said, I'm not very smart. I hate school. I failed English. I failed math. The teachers had a party when I left. And he says, and it costs $400 in order to, $500 in order to enroll in the class. I said, $500, I got $40 in the bank. You want me to go to school? You want me to pay money that I don't have? He goes, there you go again. He called me twice in less than 10 minutes, coming up with stories and excuses and reasons why I couldn't. And he kept going back, are you interested or you committed? Are you interested or you committed? I said, fine, I'll figure it out. My brother said, Johnny, I'll lend you $100. Maybe Rivka, my sister, could lend me money. Maybe dad and mom could lend you some money. Long story short, got the money, moved to Toronto, took the course, May 5th, 1980, passed the class, June 19th, 1980. On June 20th, I got my real estate certificate. And Sharon, if you want to know why I know those dates so well, it was the first test I had actually learned the material, studied, and passed without cheating.
Wow. Oh.
In many years.
Yeah.
So the power of commitment, the power of a decision, the mentor, having the right mentor who really cares, and having a path to follow, which leads me to the second thing that I wanted to share about 2020 and 2021. I want anybody who's listening or watching to answer this question. And other than colonizing Mars, okay, do we know pretty much how to anything you can think of you want to achieve? Do we know how to start a business and make it successful? How to become a coach and become successful? How to lose weight and keep it off? How to have a great relationship and sustain it? How to write a book successfully and make it a bestseller? Do we know the how to just about every goal that any one of us can think about? If the answer is yes, that means the blueprint exists. And if the blueprint exists, the how-to is not your problem, the commitment is. So if you are committed to a solution, a different life, a better life, then the answer of how to already exists. The fact that you may not know it is irrelevant to the equation. If you're committed to an outcome, the how-to is already here. You just need to make a decision that you want to and are committed to. Those are my thoughts.
It's very, very powerful. There's someone who's hearing this and they're going to be on the precipice saying, I really want to commit, and what do you say to that person who's going the but or the and they just want to keep talking after that like you didn't say? It's like there comes a point where you hear the message enough, it just becomes upon you to seize your life for you. There's seizing an excuse, seizing a story versus seizing the life you want to have. They are two different conversations.
Right. Many years ago, Sharon, when you were here in the United States on my Brainathon, you shared a story that I absolutely loved and have remembered, and many people that listened to you on my Brainathon, said that story was great. You talked about that little voice, almost like a little person on your shoulder. You remember that? It's amazing how many people allow that little voice, the little them, to hold them hostage, not realizing it's time to tell that little person, thank you for serving me in the past, but now you can leave. I'm going to step into the bigger version of myself, and I'm going to figure a way to make it happen and to fulfill my potential, to stop standing on the edge of my potential. Enough of the little voice controlling my life. Enough of the I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not worthy. Enough of I can't figure this out, I don't know how to do this, I don't have enough money. That's all the negative, disempowering, discouraging self-talk and behaviors that keep you stuck in the rut or in the same results that you have over and over and over again. And so I'm going to go back to which part of you is going to control your life. You know, the old insecure part trying to keep you safe and comfortable and miserable, or are you going to knock that off and, you know, master change instead of master disappointment? Which one?
One of the best things I ever did for myself, John, and I know I've shared this with you before, is the greatest.
Your mic is a little bit low, just so you know.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just wanted to let you know if you're recording.
Thank you. Yeah, they tested it earlier. Thank you.
Okay.
One of the things that really changed my life was realizing that little voice, that gremlin, wasn't me. It was what I trained it to become. I trained my gremlin to say to me what it said to me. I'd encouraged it, nurtured it, welcomed it, paid attention to it for hours at a time. I think a record before I realized that gremlin had hold of my brain was 2 hours, John. 2 hours before I interrupted, like, what are you doing? I grew my gremlin into the monster it became on my shoulder. That was me. It isn't like that in the beginning. We nurture that little fella to become the out of control monster it becomes. The gremlin's the perfect metaphor. And the moment I realized that was the gift, because I realized if I'd been feeding and nurturing and growing in it, then I could stop doing it and I could start nurturing something else.
That's right.
That was when everything changed for me.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so you asked the question is for anybody who's stuck in that dialogue right now, I can't because it's not the right time, because I can't afford it, because I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too white, I'm too, whatever that voice is, we're going to come back to awareness is what's going to give you the choice. So become aware of how long, how many times, how many years have you been feeding that little voice, that gremlin, and creating a monster, okay, that is controlling your life right now. And you know, there's a joke that I'm sure you've heard as well, and that is, do you know when the best time to kill a monster is?
No.
When it's a baby. Right. So a lot of us, to a certain point, have allowed the monster to get so big that the monster now controls our lives, as opposed to saying, okay, now I'm going to put this monster to bed. I'm going to put a little noose around the monster. I'm going to tie the monster over there and tell that monster to be quiet as I develop this healthy new voice that's going to encourage me, empower me, and construct a new version of me.
I learned to become a coach, John, to learn how to manage that voice. That was my only goal. I didn't have huge aspirations all those years ago. It really was, if I could just learn how to master my mind, that would be the game changer for me. If I could learn to master my thoughts and think consciously about where I want to take my life, pretty well every other problem I've got suddenly has perspective, because I realized all my problems were coming from me listening to this gremlin and acting on it. I had problems around how fearful I was, how unwell I was, how I was too scared to leave my house. I didn't create any wealth. I didn't create any value. I had endless problems, John, but it all came back to me sowing the seeds of feeding this gremlin. As long as I listened to the gremlin, I was going to make decisions from fear, from self-sabotage, and from procrastination, because it's the only voice I allowed myself to pay attention to. Yet there were all these amazing, remarkable voices around me at the exact same time. Yet I somehow managed to tune them all out as I paid homage to this voice that I created in my own mind. Then when I realized if I could learn to master this, manage it, I don't mind if it's still there sometimes. Sometimes keeping me safe from danger, like a freeway, is a really good thing. But if it only knows when to be turned on, when it's actually required for physical safety, my life's going to be a lot healthier. So evolution be damned, I spent the next 12 months managing this until it worked for me.
Yeah, so for those of your friends and audience that are watching us right now, they see behind me an Einstein image, and a Frankenstein's monster image. That represents, to me, the possibility of our imagination and all the goodness and constructiveness that we can create. And that represents the fear center, the why I can't, the I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, activated part of our brain. And the thing to understand, and this is really like a game changer break for me, is when I realized both of those reside in me. And there's nothing wrong with either one of them, but the one that I feed is the one that grows. So do I want to feed my imagination and possibilities and probabilities by feeding the Einstein part of my brain, or do I want to feed the Frankenstein part of my brain that's filled with fear and uncertainty and doubt and self-deprecating talk? And both of those exist. Now I need to learn to manage and then master. And that's what the whole book, The Inner Size, or Inner Size, was all about, is understanding that these are parts of our brain that makes us human, and it's parts of our brain that we can learn to manage and then master better.
And we're not the exceptions, John. Everybody's got both. Just you might pay attention to the Frankenstein a little too much, so you might think, oh, but I don't even have the Einstein voice in me. We all do. We just haven't nurtured it yet. It's about nurturing it, yeah. So how's your family doing in these times? How are you doing?
Well, in May of this year, my mother was diagnosed with COVID on May the 2nd, and unfortunately she died May the 8th. Yeah. At 87, she was, exercising every day, eating on her own, living in her, own apartment with help. And then, 6 days later, it was her time. And so the universal intelligence said, okay, this chapter's over. So that was a very, very sad time. And I was in a lot of grief and gratitude at the same time. And the grief was from not being able to fly and to be with her, not being able to say goodbye, face to face with my mother, and say goodbye on my mobile phone, in her hospital bed, not being able to go to a funeral and actually watching the pallbearers, take my mother's grave. My sister was there, my nephew was there, my brother-in-law was there, and on our Zoom camera, we were able to see my mother's burial. Not being able to be there, very, very, very challenging, as you know, and so that was very, very difficult. I come from a very close family. I spoke to my mother every day, for the last 40 years, no matter where it was in the world. And all of a sudden to have to say goodbye to her, and she's passed on in 6 days, that was challenging. And at the same time, she didn't suffer. It wasn't prolonged. She wasn't in any pain or suffering. So at 87, she lived a good life. We made it as comfortable as possible for her. So that was really challenging. And my mother-in-law lives with us now, so we're really careful, around COVID, and we've been pretty quarantined for many, many, many months, and we go out a little bit. We've done one road trip by car for a 3-week trip. That was great. And so we've been very, very careful and very respectful of this virus and what it can do. And I've been doing my work from my home office, and so the good news is people have been at home. And so we can help a lot more people now with the business that you're in and that I'm in the personal development industry, helping people with their mindset, their emotions, their what they do. And so business has been great. My own health has been superb. My wife's been superb. My kids are great. And so knock on a bit of wood for some of that stuff. So some interesting polarities this year of emotions, and still feel grateful and blessed. Every morning I wake up, I get another day above ground.
Yeah, exactly. As you know, my dad passed away 2 weeks ago, and we're in a situation in Australia where I can't go over there and be with them without spending 2 weeks in a little hotel room, with a guard, no fresh air. So dealing with losing my father and then told I've got to be alone for 2 weeks just after it happened, it didn't add up to be there. It just didn't add up. So I stayed here, and we had a lovely kind of service on the FaceTime. So my family who are in Perth and I'm in Melbourne, they were on FaceTime and we spent an hour together when we knew who was being cremated and we got to spend that time together there. So we created as much connection and togetherness as we possibly could. And I was really fortunate. I'd spoken to him. Father's Day was 3 days before he passed away. So I got to have a great chat with him because it was actually really good 3 days before. And then when he passed away, it was very quick as well. So he was there 1 minute and they walked in the next and he was gone. So I was very grateful about that. And I felt really complete as well. I was talking to my mum about this, I think yesterday. I felt really complete that I felt I'd done what I could and loved him as I could and given him the best as I could when he needed so much care.
Yeah.
So I felt very complete around that. So there's no regret I was holding on to. There was nothing I was holding on to afterwards. It was just that it was a really beautiful release. Huge sadness that I couldn't be with my family during that time. But also we did everything we could to create togetherness in the way that we could with what we had. And we have beautiful tools to do that today. To FaceTime in and Zoom in. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, there's a guy here in the United States by the name of Dr. Ken Druck, and he wrote a book a year or two ago called The Real Rules of Life. And Ken is a psychologist, a well-known psychologist, and he says, part of the book obviously is, we have this idea of what life's going to be like, right? We're going to have kids, our kids are, going to do X, Y, or Z, and we're going to get married, we're going to do X, Y, or Z, and then we're going to live to old age, and our kids will take care, whatever the idea that we have, and then all of a sudden something like this happens, and that's not the way it's supposed to happen, and that's the real rule of life, is we have these ideas and concepts of here's the way it's supposed to be, and then this happens. And so you and I have experienced something very similar on opposite parts of the world around losing a parent, not really being able to be there and having to adapt and modify and accept and surrender and allow and not have anger or resentment around it, and to find the good in it, right? To find whatever we can make sense of it. And that's something that, as I call learning how to be an adaptationist, which I believe is one of the greatest skills we could be exploring ourselves, teaching each other how to become better adaptationists. My hallucination is there's going to be a lot of change happening in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And unless we realize that some of the rules that we're living under are not factual, they're our idea of how things should be and how we like things to be, there is so much unrest in a variety of different facets of our world right now that we have to be prepared to adapt. And
we love certainty, John. We love certainty. The human race seems to be just geared for things to be a certain way and to be able to count on it. How are you seeing us being good at this adaptation? I see it in some, but I see a lot of people just saying, I'm waiting for things to get back to normal. And I just keep saying, as you know, this is normal. This is.
Well, it goes back to, we prefer to master disappointment than we will do to master change. And mastering change and adapting right now is one of the greatest skills that you have to learn. Yeah. And my belief is that we're on this precipice of some major shifts.
Okay, how so?
Let's just talk about something that's neutral for most people as far as I agree or don't agree. Is like, just look at climate change. Okay, you're down under. Just look at what's happened this year down under with your fires. Look at what's happening on the west coast of the United States with our fires. Look what's happening in the polar ice caps, where chunks of ice bigger than some cities, are dislodged from the Arctic shelf, and so we're seeing the beginnings of some massive change that we haven't seen in years. In certain parts of the world, it's hotter than it's ever been. So that's our political landscape and unrest around the world in a variety of different pockets is really, really serious stuff. And like, you know, in the United States, this is the first time I could ever understand civil war.
Yeah.
I live in the US. I don't vote in the US. I'm Canadian. But the division of and the polarity is so great right now between the political institutions that we have, the Democrats and the Republicans. And I'm not going to get into who I believe or like. It's irrelevant. But I can see how, you know, a brother would kill another brother. And one person who believes this and another person who believes that would actually, you know, take up arms against them. It's happening in greater amounts.
Happening. There's also less and less trust in institutions.
That's
and
right.
We can't believe in institutions to maintain stability in the status quo. We then have to find what we can latch onto to give us stability in status quo. So we're siloing out as we cling on to what we think will get us through. And that's causing tribalism. It's really, it's happening here at lesser extent, but it's definitely happening here. And speaking across the aisle never seemed to have been so difficult. I just find blind trust isn't working anymore. Whereas when I was younger and I didn't know any better, I was okay with blind trust, John. I was all good. I could just trust the institutions would take care of it and me. And I don't have that anymore.
Well, there's blind trust, but then, you know, you and I have talked about this in the past, is our brain wants to conserve energy and we are cognitively lazy. It's easier to take this road, this path, versus dig and use up energy and people are exhausted.
Yeah.
People are exhausted on this topic of mask, no mask, quarantine, don't quarantine. Is it 3 days, 7 days, 5 days? Airplanes are fine, but not this length of flight. This length of flying is okay if there's nobody in the middle seat and there's 3 seats open behind you, but that's on Sundays and Tuesdays only. And then if it's at nighttime, then this is the rule. In the morning time, this is the rule. And oh, by the way, tomorrow all this will change. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I'm exhausted going to get my groceries. The amount of level of consciousness I've got to bring to grocery shopping now, I'm exhausted trying to think it through, let alone everything else I'm trying to think about as well.
Yeah.
One of the ways I'm taking care of myself through this is I've developed a really clear purpose for during this time. Firstly, I had very realistic expectations. I've planned for 2 years that this is going to be like this for 2 years. So if I plan for a 2-year horizon versus the desire to wish it done, I'm going to be mentally more prepared for the longer term. I assume you're doing the same thing. You just assume it's 2 to 3 years.
My sister asked me the question today, and I said, just be prepared until the end of 2021 as your earliest window for any sense of things being somewhat like they were before. But be prepared that, you know, this virus is here. It's here to stay. And we will get some kind of, a vaccine against it if you want to get vaccinated. If you don't, then get yourself healthy right now.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I've done is got a really clear, my husband and I sat down, we've got a really clear purpose for during this time. Because the rules changed, so we had to adapt. So our purpose has changed, and what we want to achieve from this has realigned. And we spend every week, we do 2 or 3 hours discussing on a Sunday. How's our purpose going? Yeah. How are we going? Are we putting the right energy into the stuff that we care about? Where can we adapt? And every week we make new decisions based on it. We're being as proactive as we possibly can be during this time to give ourselves the best mental and emotional health we can during this time. Because the times are inevitable. We can't get rid of the virus. We can't get rid of how people are reacting to it. And we can't change government responses to it. But what we can manage is how we navigate ourselves through it. What is some of the things you and Maria are doing?
Health. So we're exercising every day. We are eating, perfectly. We are actually getting a lot of sleep. We've been working on just making sure that our immune systems are just topped off. We've had blood tests done. We've checked on all of the vitals, and first and foremost is our spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical health. So that's the SEMP model that we follow.
Wonderful.
Maria doesn't meditate every day. I do. So I'm doing everything possible to make sure that my body has got a high immune system that is working really, really well. So that's part one. Part two, I'm limiting the amount of news that I'm watching. When this first started, I was probably consuming 3 to 4 hours a day of trying to figure out what was going on. Something you mentioned earlier that I made a note of to make sure I come back to is none of us are watching news. We're watching opinions, right? And so we were confusing news with opinions because by the time we're getting it, they've already analyze what they think it means and who's right and who's wrong and what works and what doesn't. And we're not getting an unfiltered news. We're getting a very, very filtered news. And so there's several people, that I can rely on that are impartial to this or that and are really, really great on the science as it relates to COVID, for example. So I'm getting my source from my neighbor down the street who spends 7 hours a day researching the research and really understand what's happening in Europe and in Asia and in the United States and in Australia and in the Middle East and is able to coalesce the best information into a cohesive thing to think about. And so, he sends me things almost every day until I had to tell him, okay, you know what? Once a week now, you can give me an update.
I need the digest version. I don't need the full encyclopedia.
He was sending me, watch this video for an hour. This guy's great, or this girl's great. Or not see a bunch of bullshit. Then watch. No, I don't want to see it. I don't have any time for the bullshit.
Yeah, I don't want the blow by blow. Give me the summation, and I don't want the sausage. I want the summation before I went through the sausage mill.
Yeah. Just give me the tanned version.
Yes. And mentally, what are you guys doing?
We have been, we just went on a 3-week road trip, and we stayed in Airbnbs or at our home in Colorado, and then we just went away for a weekend to a very, very quiet little resort with only 12 guests at the resort. Everybody far apart away. So we're planning little trips to get away from our home. I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate for me. My wife, Maria, had 3 major surgeries last year. So we were home for a whole year already. Yeah. I closed my office. I'd moved into a home office so I can be here to help support her. She had 2 back surgeries and femoral artery surgery, major ones. And so we were already home. And fortunately, we actually fell deeper into love. We happen to like each other a lot, and we love each other a lot, and so we fell deeper into love. And so we've been watching a lot of movies together and reading next to each other and talking and sharing our thoughts and opinions on it and just expressing. But what I can also share with you, this is actually not a common thing. We have actually, this may not sound great, but we've actually deliberately chosen to stay away from certain friends. And they're, some of our friends that may not be as happily married, shall we say, are just become psychic vampires. And some of the beliefs that they have, whether it's they're misinformed about the coronavirus, or they're just not happy together, and being together in a closed environment has exacerbated their disdain for each other. We have just said, okay, we have to put certain people and couples, at bay, because they're just toxic to, to the environment that we want to make sure is really healthy right now. So we've deliberately, just decided in some of our dialogues is, we're not going to get together people. And then we just started going to, here we can, we can go out and have masks on. And so we've just started either inviting friends over for dinners outside, or go to their house outside, or restaurants outside, where there aren't a lot of people. So we have a little bit of latitude right now, whereas before we didn't have any at all.
No, Melbourne still doesn't have any at the time of this recording. Yeah, we can't go out at all. John, is there anything else you want to share? I'm mindful that we've been going for a fair while. I could actually keep, I've watched the time. I thought, no, I could just keep going.
You can chat. Listen, the stuff that's important is, I talked to my sons. I got 2 boys, 25 and 23, and I said, listen, guys, times are challenging and they're tough, and this too shall pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. We'll figure out a resilient species. And this is our time to surrender, allow, forgive, accept, and take the time to become more. Take the time to become more aware. More, more at peace with yourself, healthier, more focused, and this too shall pass. There's a. Do you remember Jim Rohn? The philosopher. He says one of the things you learn about squirrels is in summer they plan for winter. Right, so they're collecting as many nuts as they can in the summertime because they know winter is coming, and so they're planning a season or two ahead. And so what can you do during this time that maybe you didn't have the chance to do when you were so busy, going, and now you're not, you have a few hours extra a day. What are you doing to become better? What are you doing to become more loving, caring, kind, peaceful, mindful, aware? What are you doing to advance the stuff that you didn't have time to before?
Yeah.
Right. So do it now.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Yeah.
Or you're going to come up with excuses again now. And then, right. So don't keep feeding that little voice. Okay, that is going to become into the monster of I should have, I could have, I would have.
Yeah. Because this time will pass and we'll have the summation of how we spent this time or
That's
invested this time. I've become quite good at yoga, John, which I never do.
I know. It's awesome.
And I'm not that flexible. I need to rename yoga flopping around the floor but trying really hard with having lots of fun. That's what I call yoga. But yeah, it's been a great time to express and move through this experience rather than fighting it, resisting it, and wishing that it wasn't. Because we have to move through it. It's the only way it's going to happen. Thank you so much, Mr. Assaraf.
Thank you so much for having me on. What a joy.
You're fabulous.
So are you, my dear. I love you.
I love you too.
All right.
Big hugs. I miss hugs.
Big hugs to you. Big hugs to your beautiful hubby.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.